Hello again from Cambodia. I've had an amazing last 9 days here as I've traveled a little bit in Cambodia, and I wanted just to take a few moments and share some testimonies of what the Lord's been doing through my time. Now, in the last video that I had sent, I had shared that I was going to be getting up early one morning, getting on a bus and traveling into northern Cambodia near the Lao border. And so the Friday morning that I was set to do that, I had set my alarm for 6:15 and so that I could make it to the bus on time. Now, I don't know if my alarm did not go off or I didn't hear it or what happened, but at 6:30 I'm suddenly awakened from a deep sleep and someone's knocking on my door. And I look at my clock and it says 6:30 and I'm already worried, oh no, I'm gonna miss my bus. So I jump out of bed and I answer my door, and when I open my door, there's no one there. And so I don't know if the Lord had sent an angel or what, but I knew from that moment that God was ordaining that weekend, that it was important to Him that I was up and on that bus, and that He had something special for us over the weekend. And even though it was a 9-hour bus ride one way, I knew all weekend that the Lord had set this thing up, and it was great. Some of the testimonies that I was able to hear on the very last session that I had taught. The woman who's known as the oldest believer, she's in her 50s. She became a believer as a young child, and her family had moved up to this city. And she gets up and says, I've been so encouraged this week. My entire life of being in church, I've never heard such a clear and detailed teaching on worship. And she even goes on to say, I was even surprised and shocked that it had come from such a young man. And she said that there was this new excitement in her heart towards this next generation that God's raising up of messengers that really know the Lord. And so I was really encouraged by that. Also, earlier in the day, I'd met with some of the leaders of the youth group. There's about 40 in their youth and young adult group. And just to see the tears in this young man's eyes as he says to me, Cody, the word that you had shared with us last night, that was truly a word from the Lord for me, and I believe for our church. And the word that I was sharing was out of Haggai. And at this time in the book of Haggai, it's around 520 BC, the people had been consumed with building their own houses, and they neglected the finishing of building God's house. And so God raises up Haggai, says, it's not time to build your house, it's now time to build the Lord's house. And so we see also through the book of Haggai how the Spirit of God begins to stir the leaders and the people. God commands them to build, and He says, I promise I'm going to be with you. And so they begin to build. They end up finishing the building of the temple and restoring again the worship ministry, and how God just was going to begin to release blessing as the foundation of the temple was laid. And so I believe that was not just the word for here in Cambodia, that it's time to build the Lord's house. I believe that anyone who has ears to hear what the Spirit is saying in our generation knows that this is what God is doing in the nations, that He is stirring hearts of people, and they're now beginning to respond and say, we must build the house of the Lord. And so we're seeing in the nations this global worship and prayer movement that's beginning to arise. We also see how this worship movement, God is now beginning to bring together with the missions movement. And I believe we're going to see the greatest revival, greatest harvest of souls that has ever happened in any time in history. And we are living at such a time as this. And so they had testified over the weekend saying, we'd been feeling something like this in our hearts, but we've never had someone give language to it. So I was really encouraged by that. On the Sunday, I took the bus back here to Phnom Penh, and Monday morning I began teaching in the DTS, and I taught about 18 hours through the week. And again, it was just such an amazing week. I've never felt the presence and the sweetness of God through this last week at any other time like I have this week. It was just amazing, and I was able to teach and just speak from my heart more than I ever have. I almost hardly used any notes my whole week. Just the Holy Spirit was just really clearly leading and directing. And a few of the things that happened this week, on one of the mornings as I was teaching, I felt that there was a number of people who had never had that real experience in the Holy Spirit, that they knew that they were filled, that God really loved them, and that they had not even seen the gifts of the Spirit activated in their lives. And so as I called a number of them forward, almost every one of them that had come forward had really experienced the tangible presence of the Lord. Almost every single one of them began to speak in new tongues, and there was just this new freedom and joy that began to come into the students. And even later in the week, I heard from one of the students, he said, Cody, this week right now has been the most significant week of my last 22 years. And so he was just so grateful and saying thank you to me and thank you to the Lord for doing new things in his heart. There was even a young woman as well who growing up had experienced much physical and sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and she'd been just feeling the weight of this on her shoulders, this shame, and so she even had physical pain in her body. And so as the Lord directed me, we were able to pray for her as well, and she was physically set free of physical pain. She even said that this weight was lifted off her shoulders, that she had this new confidence in the love of God towards her. And there was just this new countenance in her face, and you look in her eyes, there's this new brightness, this new sense of hope in her. And it's just so exciting to see that. The staff were greatly encouraged as I ministered to them, I prophesied over them. And it was so fun for me through this week just beginning to prophesy over Asia, saying, this is your destiny at the end of the age. And speaking out of Isaiah 24, how as the nations are being shaken right before the return of Jesus, that out of the east we hear songs rising, glory to the righteous one. And beginning to proclaim to them out of Malachi chapter 1 verse 11 how in every place pure incense, pure worship is going to arise, and the name of the Lord will be great in the nations among the Gentiles. And how Asia, this is your destiny, that all across Southeast Asia and many other nations, that pure incense worship is going to arise. And as this worship begins to arise, we're going to see the greatest harvest come in. This is going to be the provoking of Israel, the salvation of Israel, and then unto the return of Jesus. And just seeing this new sense of urgency and excitement in the students saying, wow, we really are living at a strategic time in history. This is not a time to be building our house. This is a time to be fully building the Lord's house. And so though it's been a tiring week, I want to say thank you. Many of you have been praying for me. And I just felt just that stirring, that power of the Spirit in me this week that I know that has come from you praying for me. So thank you so much. Tomorrow I'm on the airplane again back to Israel. And then on December 24th, I'm on the plane again and I'm headed to Switzerland for 10 days. I've been invited as a guest speaker to speak to a couple different youth groups at a ski camp up in the Alps. And so I ask again, would you be praying for me as I go to Switzerland, that these youth again would be stirred, that God would continue to do new things in them. And so thank you again for partnering with me. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. May Jesus be the center of Christmas for you this year. And God bless you.